This is a CBS News special report. I'm Charlie Rose with Nora O'Donnell and Gail King on the National Mall in Washington. On this inauguration morning, we're about to get our first look at the next president of the United States. Donald Trump will come out of Blair House across from the White House, where he and his family spent last night.
The president-elect will attend services at a nearby church before meeting the president and Mrs. Obama at the White House. Mr. Trump will take the oath of office at the Capitol in just over 3 hours. Major Garrett is in the crowd outside Blair House. Major, good morning.
Good morning. We are awaiting for the elaborate, slow-moving choreography of President-elect and the incoming first family to come out of Blair House. And there's nothing particularly elaborate about a sly, over-the-shoulder look into the camera, but that's the best we can do here on the riser overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue and Blair House. This is all supposed to begin 8:30 sharp Eastern Time. The first family to be a little teeny bit behind schedule, but we're waiting for them to come out. As my cameraman Dan Tutman will show our audience, you can see all of the Secret Service vehicles lined up. I can tell you there has been a noticeable uptick in the last couple of minutes in activity and anticipation of the first family coming down those stairs underneath the green awning and canopy that you see at Blair House. They will get into a motorcade, take a very slow block-and-a-half drive to St. John's Church for a ceremonial and traditional church service before coming to the White House and setting all of the Inauguration Day ceremony, pageantry, and a bit of civic religion in motion. Guys, back to you.
And Major, I know you've been talking to a number of Trump advisors. Just how anxious is he to get to work and have a shortened, essentially, inaugural parade or luncheon?
Well, he's very eager to get to work, and it's interesting you asked me that, Nora, because when he was first presented, President-elect Trump, the entire schedule for today, he looked at the congressional luncheon right after the swearing-in and said, do I really have to do that? I'd much rather go back to the White House straight away and start signing executive orders. And he was really prevailed upon in the course of about 2 days of negotiations with his staff that it's not only a tradition, but it's an act of respect for an incoming president to Congress and the centrality of Congress in working through legislative issues with the executive branch. And he was reminded, after all, it is a Congress run by your fellow Republicans, so you might want to stay, go through the tradition, and show and pay your respects. In the end, President-elect Trump agreed, but his initial inclination was to come straight back here and start signing executive orders. That will happen sometime today.
Here he comes.
We're not quite. And we see them coming out.
There is
Blair House now.
The next president of the United States walking out of Blair House, about to get into his car to go to church, where his vice president-elect Mike Pence has already gone into the church. The president coming down the steps, and will take a short ride.
And he is, of course, joined by Melania Trump, who is channeling Jackie Onassis.
Very Jackie O today. I was thinking that exact same thing.
And they will get in the Suburban. And it's funny, you really could walk to the church. It's just about a block away. But, of course, security might prevent him from doing that, so he will ride over there. John Dickerson and Bob Schieffer are with us here as well throughout the morning. John, good morning.
Hey, Nora.
Yeah.
Who among us hasn't been a little late to church? Come in during the first hymn and you just kind of slide into the pew.
Growing up with 4 kids in my family, we were always late to church.
I think they'll hold for him, don't you, John?
Yes. No, they'll wait for the
There'll
first
be no sermon until he arrives.
But this starts a busy day.
It does start a busy day. You know, I just want to pick up on something Major said. Now begins the constraints of the presidency on Donald Trump, who is impatient, who wants to do his own things, but there are the ceremonial constraints. There are the things you got to do as president. And one of the things we're going to watch is him buck, as all presidents do, against the meetings you don't want to go to, against the ceremonial things you don't want to have to attend, and how many of those he'll be able to get out of, and how many he'll have to go through because he's now in that role.
My guess is that some of the things that Barack Obama has been talking to him about, how this office will constrain and temper you.
Right, and President Obama's argument is because of all of those ceremonial parts of the job, you need a staff around you so they can do a lot of the work and present you with clear, sharp decisions, because you're just not going to have the time. And it'll be really interesting to see if Donald Trump puts a system in place that works with that, or whether he, like many presidents, says, you know, thanks for the advice, pal, but we've got our own way of doing things. And presidents do that, and then they learn finally after a year or so they got to.
But Bob Schieffer, could he be more traditional than we think he's going to be? You know, there were a lot of rumors that he might not even stay at Blair House, that he may stay at the Trump Hotel. He did not do that. He was persuaded not to miss that congressional luncheon. He's now going to the church where presidents have done for years. Maybe he could be more traditional than we're expecting, than some people are expecting, Bob Schieffer.
Donald Trump is going to be Donald Trump. We kept saying during the campaign, is he going to change? At the Republican convention, we came out of there, and I remember saying one of the things that actually turned out to be true during this campaign year, at least coming from me. I said he is going to campaign in the general election as Donald Trump. And I think he is going to preside, at least in the first part of this presidency, as Donald Trump. One point here that's kind of important, you know, this is one church service. When you're president, they won't start till he gets there. Most other church services start when the minister starts them, but they'll give him a little elasticity, as they would any president on this one.
Yeah, every president since James Madison has attended service at St. John's. There's a special pew. It's pew number 54 that's reserved for the president's family. It's a very special church.
Absolutely, and right across the street, a great commute. You know, it's all set up for him.
Yes,
well,
Bob?
It's also interesting, too. I mean, what it says in terms of the president going to church, regardless of denomination, and with great respect for separation between church and state.
Yeah, and it's a part of, he is sliding into the American tradition, and people keep talking about this peaceful transfer of power. When the country started, you know, that was not sure it was going to happen each time, and they would always boast, no matter how ugly the campaign was, at least we've done it in this peaceful way better than the Europeans who do it through wars and through succession of kings.
All this day we're looking at what democracy does, and we hope achieve the peaceful transition of power and a respect for the people who lost and appreciation of the people who won.
And that's one of the things I'm looking for in the speech. It's a renewal of all these American themes and values and history, and a president can access all of that. It's sitting right there ready for him. Does he access it? He has not been he hasn't plugged himself into history through his campaign, but today this is an act of American renewal that a president can participate in or not. So will he? Not just physically, but in what he says and in what he does. Does he grab onto all of that richness that's sitting there waiting for him to grab it? And the reason is that that's a way to bring everybody together, as Susan Page was talking about earlier. This is a unique moment. This is an opportunity, a thing to grab. And just does he do it?
Eric Trump said something interesting to me yesterday. I know he's biased because he's his father's son. He said, people seem to forget, my father wants to do a good job. Well, you know, he wants to get in the office. Yeah. He said, I know that there are some divisions right now, but my father is very good at what he does, and this is a job he's taking very seriously, and he wants to do the right thing.
But you would assume that, though. I mean, we would assume he wants to be a great president, he wants to do the right thing. He also
I think people forget
may differ with others as to how best do that, and that's where you have conflict.
You know, guys, I would add one thing here. As this limo pulls out here, it's beginning to me, one of the most interesting parts of inauguration day, because he's going to go to church, and then from church he and his wife will then go to the White House for coffee. Sometimes that turns out to be a very warm kind of meeting. Laura Bush and George W. Bush said their real friendship with the Obamas began with that tea. But there have been some cases, like back when Eisenhower was president, he wouldn't even go in the White House. He waited for President Truman to come out and get in the car so they could drive up
pulling out as you talked about to go
Avenue.
To the church.
Here they go, and here it began.
Yes. And Major Garrett is there watching the Blair House. Major?
Well, I can tell you a couple of things, folks. We have a bit of rain falling now. The weather forecast today said that would not occur until about 11 or 12 o'clock. Here in Washington, it's begun to fall now. Very short drive to St. John's Church. And one thing that John Dickerson was talking about in this speech, I've been told it will be shorter than most inaugural addresses, maybe 20 minutes, maybe not even that long. It will have a note of humility in talking about this president as an instrument of a movement that surprised the country and, to a certain respect, even surprised President Trump. Because along the campaign, he had a hunch he could win, but was never quite sure he could win. Harnessing that movement, being a vessel for that movement, and describing it to the rest of the country, who is skeptical and in some cases fearful of that movement, will be one task for the inaugural address.
Well, Major, you just pointed out that it's about to rain, and President-elect Trump made jokes about the rain last night. He goes, I don't care if it rains because it will show people that my hair is real. And that's, you know, he said, I don't care about that. If it rains, nothing is going to bother me. Margaret Brennan, you were there at the church. What can you tell us?
We are, Galen. We are watching these Secret Service Suburbans pull up, getting into position as Donald Trump, the president-elect, gets ready to arrive here at St. John's Episcopal. This will be the 12th inaugural service that has been held for an incoming president. We know Vice President Mike Pence pulled up just moments earlier and walked in along with family, accompanied by his wife. And they're going inside to join a number of future cabinet members who have piled in there in the past few. We can see Melania Trump walking out, smiling to the cameras here, dressed all in blue. Walking into St. John's, where Nikki Haley, Health and Human Service Secretary, designee Tom Price, retired General James Mattis are gathered. And you can see the future first couple walking up the steps here. And St. John's has been a place for many presidents to worship. Abraham Lincoln used to slip in here during the Civil War into the back pew and reflect. You see Donald Trump walking in now. We know that the sermon that will be delivered by a Baptist preacher is focused, he said, on leadership. As God designates leaders, they're going to be talking about friendship, encouragement, and he asked for all those Americans who did not vote for Donald Trump to say a prayer for him today.
And I think it's noteworthy to see Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, part of the family. They, of course, are of the Jewish faith. This is a church where many people of different faiths have worshipped.
And different presidents have relied on that church. Thinking about Lincoln, he said, I confess there are times when the job has driven me to my knees. All presidents, whether they are of strong faith or not, find it in office because they need it.
And the sermon will be about leadership, in a sense, and the very thing that Donald Trump is going to have to show at this moment.
And leadership not just of his incredibly strong and devoted following, but leadership of an entire country.
A test of leadership is the ability to unite a whole nation.
320 million people now are on his team by the Constitution and the election. We're all now together, and now his leadership has to be for that new larger group.
Bob Schieffer, you have covered a number of these inaugurations. This is setting the tone for the rest of the day, starting first in prayer.
Is she talking?
Bob? Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Okay. So, Bob, I was just saying you've covered a number of these inaugurations, and this really sets the tone for the rest of the day, starting the day in prayer.
Yes, but it's this ride up to the Capitol that's going to be interesting, Nora. And what will that conversation? Yes, because it's kind of the most unusual carpool in the world when you stop and think about it. I mean, here you have Mr. Trump, and you have the president, and then in the following car you have their wives. So many times, I mean, Truman and Eisenhower never talked. Herbert Hoover refused to speak to Franklin Roosevelt as they were making that trip. So what unfolds there? I mean, you could almost do a book about this trip from the White House up to the Capitol.
What's interesting, Bob, and I would have loved to know all of the details of all the conversations that have taken place between Barack Obama and President-elect Trump. What did they say? What did they talk? What did the president say to the president-elect? And what were the president-elect's questions as he assumes the office as his successor?
You know, he said in the beginning that President Obama was very, very helpful to him, gave him some good advice. He sounded like he was a good listener. We don't really know what questions he asked President Obama when they were in there. But again, those are the things that history books, that's what makes them interesting, because it may be years before we know what they talked about.
Well, but clearly we know that it must have been working for both of them, because my understanding is it continued up until very recently.
No,
Yes,
Eric Trump told me this yesterday. Bob, just a second. I talked to Eric Trump and asked him this very question. He said they speak more than people realize.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he said, you know, I can't tell you the nature of the conversations because he does know. He said, but you know what, Gail, they actually like each other. They spend a lot of time, and he expects the conversations to continue. But you're right, Charlie. No, I never think of a fly as a good thing, but I would love to be in that car today.
It'd be a platform moment.
Yeah.
For a ride.
Just for a second.
It is an elite club
Yes,
that
it is.
Donald Trump joins
He's about
today.
to join. Exactly.
And I think they both have very strong feelings today. Thank you very much, Bob Schieffer. CBS This Morning special coverage of the presidential inauguration will continue for most of you. The rest of you will join us after your local news. We'll also have coverage throughout the day on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. This has been a CBS News special report.